Great. Thank you. Now a question from one of our Zoom audience participants. How do you propose to ensure that our smallest and most rural communities are not left behind in the global energy transition? And Rick, this question starts with you.
The philosophy of that I have with government is that the freedom of the individual is to be protected. That's what the framers of our Constitution established. And the federal system is supposed to limit the powers of the federal government. The state government has more powers, but they're supposed to be somewhat limited as well. The greater powers devolve onto the individual. And I think small towns need to have the authority to go in the direction that they choose to go. They have that ability to do that. So as has mentioned earlier, revisions to Act 250 would be a good place to start, but that wouldn't be necessarily all that takes place. I think that the small towns of Vermont, there's so many of those small towns, are the gems of our town, of our state. And I want to preserve and protect those.
Okay. Mark?
Oh, small town. You hiding over there?
You want me to read the question again?
Yeah, please.
Sure. How do you propose to ensure that our smallest and most rural communities are not left behind in the global energy transition?
Global energy transition. I think we're really off track here. Everybody's going global. I think we need to come back local. Towns need to decide for themselves. If you think we're gonna milk a bunch of stuff out of China to energy transition, it isn't gonna happen. If you think Vermont's gonna continue to be a welfare state on the tit of the federal government, it isn't gonna happen. The Federal Reserve is an illegal entity, and you need to promote business to help support Vermont, not trash the economy with fantastic dreams.
All right, thank you. Wendy?
Okay, so I think that what the asker of the question is talking about, we're talking about global energy transition. So that would be solar, electrification, heat standards. What makes me unique is that I've actually worked for small communities and I know how hard it is. I know how much gets done by volunteers. And so the communication with small communities is just critical. Some of that can go through the regional commission, some of it can go through VLCT, but it's really important to have that direct communication. So I think what we need is legislation that gives small communities a general goal and then lets them figure out how to get to that goal. So say, for example, I'm gonna run out of time, so I'm gonna 30 seconds, okay. So say, for example, electric vehicles, the state has funding for charging. People can actually save money, both in the purchase of the vehicle and in how much it costs to operate the vehicle. So it's a savings to the consumer. It's not a higher cost. So small communities can get chargers to help with electric vehicles. That's not difficult. Broadband is huge. Broadband really brings small communities up to the level of the bigger communities when you're looking at places that folks want to move to. And the broadband initiative of the state, which Representative Sebelo was huge in getting started and continuing. I'm very supportive of that process. Thank you.
All
right, so to answer this question, I think it goes back a bit to what I was talking about earlier, which is that there's no one-size-fits-all policy for every town, and we also, legislators, have to make sure that they're visiting these towns to hear about what their issues are. Somewhat recently, I think it was last month, I went up to Wardsboro to talk with folks in town there. I learned about their issues with waterways, and I also learned about their goals to change to provide more clean energy additions to their office buildings. Another issue that I want to look at are unfunded mandates. I went to Halifax, I think it was several weeks ago. And, just one example, one thing that we were talking about were the differences between bridges and culverts and the significant price increase when it comes to having to replace a culvert with a bridge. And how these impacts, when it comes to our waterways, which in a roundabout way are connected to how we consume energy. When it comes to our waterways, how we are building resiliency, but also thinking about the fact that we can't be creating unfunded mandates. And that also applies to not just bridges and culverts, but other issues that might arise for towns when legislation is getting made.
Thank you. Tim? Thanks.
Global energy transition. I think we really need to seek a balance in Vermont between protecting jobs and protecting our environment. We need to do our part on a global level with protecting our environment, but we also need to be very in tune with people who work for a living and have to pay gas to put in their car and oil in their furnaces and boilers. I worked pretty hard on a home rule pilot program during 2018 and 2019, testified in the Senate, and that didn't turn out to be a productive endeavor, but there were some side successes. The idea of that was simply to have a pilot program where small towns could take control of some of the aspects of their town that they understood better than perhaps the folks in Montpelier did. That was not successful, but I think through groups like VLCT, who are very strong advocates for municipal governments, but both large and small, that's the way to, I think an independent can really be a catalyst to reach compromises in things like global energy as well. Thank you.